The film begins with a small family on a boat. The family members are named Andy, Kay, and their baby, Rosie. During the journey, Andy sees a family that seems very happy. Andy then greets the family, but the father of that family pulls out a gun, signaling that Andy should stay away from his family. To avoid any risks, Andy then goes back to his boat and continues the journey. As night falls, Andy ties the boat to a piece of wood in the middle of the river and retrieves some medical supplies floating near the boat. Andy opens the supplies and finds a map of Australia. Several locations on the continent are marked in red, indicating that those areas are infected by a deadly virus. That night, Kay tells Andy that their food supplies will only last for a few more days. She also suggests that Andy find a town on the mainland about 30 to 40 kilometers from their boat, hoping that the situation out there has improved. However, Andy refuses and says that the situation outside has not improved, but has worsened. Andy remains focused on his goal, which is to follow the river until they reach a military base. Kay urges Andy to reconsider for Rosie's safety when the food supplies run out. The next day, they continue their journey. Along the way, Andy sees a small boat that is half sunken. Andy ties his boat and goes to the small boat, hoping to find something useful. Andy boards the boat and is surprised to find usable food supplies and a bottle of wine. He quickly gathers the food supplies. However, his gaze immediately turned to the cabin door, which slowly opened and made a noise. Realizing something was wrong, Andy quickly packed up the food and got out safely. On the boat, Andy surprised Kay by telling her he had found enough food to last them 3 to 4 months. He also mentioned that the boat was safe and the food was still fresh. Hearing this, Kay felt relieved. She then told her husband to rest for a while as she took her turn to keep watch. While keeping watch, Kay found a bottle of wine and a birthday card from Andy. This made her happy, and she thought there might be more valuable items on the boat that she could use and give to her husband. She decided to go back to the boat alone and take some useful items. However, a few moments later, the boat made a noise again and the door slowly moved. Panicked, Kay tried to leave the boat, but she was too late. She was grabbed by something inside the boat. On the other side, Andy woke up from his sleep to the sound of his baby crying. He quickly picked up Rosie and looked for Kay. Instead, he found bloodstains on the floor, which turned out to be from his severely injured wife. Andy immediately treated her wounds and saw that she was wearing a bracelet that counted down the time until she would turn into a zombie. After cleaning the wound, Andy decided to go to a hospital to save his wife. They argued because it was too risky, and Kay didn't want her husband and child to end up infected like her. Eventually, they decided to look for the nearest hospital. Along the way, they encountered many zombies impaled by spears and burned. After some time, they found a car that needed fuel. Luckily, Andy found some gasoline and filled the car. Kay, already inside the car, found some sticky liquid, indicating a zombie presence in the area. Sure enough, a zombie approached them. Kay signaled Andy with the car's turn signal to warn him. Thankfully, Andy quickly got into the car and they escaped the zombie. During the journey, Andy pulled over to check the map, and Kay changed Rosie's diaper outside the car. However, suddenly Kay disappeared. Andy immediately got out of the car and found his wife convulsing and secreting thick fluid from her mouth. Andy quickly calmed Kay down to prevent her from turning into a zombie. They continued their journey. Once Kay regained consciousness, she opened her wound and saw that it was oozing the same sticky fluid as the zombies. Realizing she was infected with the zombie virus, Kay asked Andy to stop and leave her there. She didn't want to turn into a zombie and harm her husband and daughter. Frustrated, Kay urged her husband to take their daughter away before she changed. Andy hugged his wife and assured her that he would always be there, and that she would get better. They still had 43 hours before Kay would turn into a zombie. Finally, Andy managed to convince her to continue their journey, although it was clear that Kay had no hope left. Shortly after they resumed their journey, Andy, who was not focused, swerved the car to avoid a zombie that suddenly appeared in front of them. The car veered off and crashed into a large tree. Andy saw that a tree branch had impaled Kay's abdomen. He and his wife quickly tried to remove the branch, but their efforts were in vain. Panicked, both Kay and Andy gradually lost consciousness. A while later, Andy regained consciousness and tried to wake his wife, but he was horrified to find her face covered in sticky fluid. Panicked, Andy unbuckled his seatbelt, and suddenly Kay's eyes opened, confirming she had turned into a zombie. Andy quickly grabbed Rosie from the back seat, but Kay bit his arm. As Andy escaped the car, he realized his arm was severely injured. Frustrated, he saw his little angel and his thoughts shifted. He needed to reach the military base before he turned into a zombie and harmed his daughter. He then killed his wife to prevent her from attacking anyone else and to let her go peacefully. Andy continued his journey on foot, occasionally playing with his daughter using perfume to keep Rosie from crying during the journey. A while later, Andy encountered the zombie that had stood in the middle of the road earlier. He noticed that a piece of wood had been placed in the zombie's mouth to prevent it from biting anyone. And sure enough, a young girl came and said that the zombie was her father. The girl was named Thumi. She then told Andy to go and lure the zombie away. Without a second thought, Andy continued his journey. As night began to fall, Andy found himself in a small town, slowly exploring room by room until he met someone named Etta. Etta realized that Andy was infected with the zombie virus. She helped Andy treat his wound. Seeing that Etta was a good person, Andy thought about leaving Rosie with Etta, but he noticed that Etta was wearing a wig and discovered she had cancer. Andy decided against it. While in the bathroom, Andy fell and experienced the same symptoms as his wife, slowly losing consciousness. When he woke up, Andy found himself in a different room. He saw a sign indicating that he still had 32 hours before turning into a zombie. He then went to find Rosie, who was with Etta, and told her that he would continue his journey to a military base. Etta gave him a photo showing Thumi's family. Etta suggested that Andy join their colony because they were a good family. Thumi's family fought off zombies around the area, and their colony was a place with people from all over the world. However, Andy still wanted to go to the military base. Upon arrival, he did not find the base, but instead found several zombie soldiers buried up to their heads. Andy quickly left the area. But one zombie woke up due to the noise Andy made. Andy found a car and tried to open it. Suddenly, someone shot at Andy from a hole, but it turned out the person was aiming at a zombie behind Andy. The person named Vic invited Andy to his place. There, Andy met Lorraine. Vic told Andy to take care of his daughter because if he wanted to stay, he had to work with Vic. Andy then went to a place where several zombies were swarming around an iron cage. Vic instructed Andy to shoot the zombies. However, Andy was shocked to see a young girl used as bait. Vic explained that the girl was indeed bait, used to lure the zombies so he could kill them and take the valuable items from their bodies. Vic planned to become rich by selling these items once the zombie threat was over. However, Andy emphasized that a normal world would never exist again, and he shouldn't take people captive to use them as bait for the zombies. They both eventually returned home. At night, Andy began to have convulsions. He decided to go outside and end his life. Before he was ready to do so, Lorraine arrived carrying Rosie. Lorraine told Andy that she wanted to be taken away from this place. She explained that Vic was not a good man. He had killed her husband to have her. Lorraine also promised to take care of Rosie after Andy turned into a zombie. She already knew that Andy was infected. Unfortunately, Vic overheard their conversation and knocked Andy out. When Andy regained consciousness, he found himself in a cage with Thumi. Moments later, zombies appeared. Andy took some meat used as bait and tied it to a rope. He threw it to the zombies, hoping they would pull the rope and open the cage. His plan worked, and they both escaped the cage, although they were still chained together. They went to Vic's house, woke Lorraine, took Rosie, and retrieved the keys. They quietly escaped. Shortly after, Vic woke up and came out with a rifle. He tried to shoot Andy, but Lorraine was hit instead as she shielded Andy. They both ran away, with Vic chasing them, vowing to hunt Andy down for revenge. Luckily, they managed to hide in a cave. In the cave, they removed their chains. It became evident that Andy was slowly beginning to act like a zombie, although not fully yet. The next day, Andy asked Thumi to take him to the river, but Thumi needed to check on her father, whom she had confined. She didn't want her father to be killed by her mother's zombie hunting group. Meanwhile, Thumi's mother mourned over a piece of clothing with the name Willie on it, which was the uniform worn by Thumi's zombie father, confirming that he had been destroyed by her mother's group. When Thumi arrived at the site, she only found a rope and her father's uniform. Looking up, she saw her father was dead. Thumi cried in sorrow and started hitting her head with a rock. Andy saw Thumi doing this and immediately stopped her. Thumi, angry, said she should have been there with her father, not with Andy. She also said she didn't care about Andy or his baby anymore. Andy then looked at his hand and realized he only had 9 hours left. He asked Thumi to go to the boat with him. However, Thumi refused, and eventually Andy left Thumi to continue his journey. But after just a few steps, Andy's body became weak, and he lost consciousness. Hearing a baby crying, Thumi quickly searched for the source, and when Andy woke up, he saw that Rosie was already with Thumi. Thumi had changed her mind and decided to go with Andy. Upon reaching the river, they boarded a boat and headed to a certain place. It turned out Andy was going to where he had encountered a family at the beginning of the film. He intended to leave Rosie and Thumi with that family. However, when they arrived, the place was very quiet. Outside, Andy saw a trail and followed it. He found the family playing. Andy spoke to the man, who revealed that he had been bitten by a zombie. They agreed to commit suicide because they did not want to become zombies and endanger innocent people. The man told Andy he had 6 bullets, 4 for his family, and the rest for Andy and his daughter. But Andy refused and left the family. Moments later, Andy heard 3 gunshots and one last shot right behind him. He picked up the gun and considered that suicide with Rosie might be the way to reunite with Kay. But suddenly his little daughter called him Daddy for the first time, which made Andy reconsider. At that moment, Thumi arrived and said she was going to return to her mother and invited Andy to come along. Perhaps Etta's words from before were the right choice. Before leaving, Thumi applied something to Rosie's face to prevent zombies from tracking her. During the journey, they encountered Vic, who was waiting at the end of the tunnel to avenge Lorraine's death. They fought, and Vic, still strong, grabbed Thumi and knocked her unconscious. He also took Rosie and said that since Andy had taken the person he loved most, Andy should feel the same loss. As Vic was about to harm Rosie, Andy calmed him down, causing Vic to cry. Andy managed to take Rosie from Vic and continued their journey with the unconscious Thumi. On the way, Andy felt strange and eventually collapsed. Upon waking, sticky fluid was oozing from his eyes and mouth. Andy felt hungry when he saw a piece of meat beside him, possibly a symptom before fully turning into a zombie. However, he quickly regained his senses and grabbed some pieces of meat. A few moments later, his body could no longer withstand the virus. He quickly tied his hands and put a gag in his mouth to prevent himself from biting anyone. He then instructed Thumi to promise to protect Rosie. Andy's strong desire to save Rosie, even in his zombie state, made him realize that Rosie's safety was the most important thing. Then, Andy walked, carrying Thumi and Rosie with a piece of meat as bait in front of him. They eventually reached the place where Thumi's mother was conducting a zombie eradication. The group took Rosie and Thumi from Andy's back, and before Andy died, Thumi sprayed the perfume that Rosie used. Andy was then put down, ending his life. And the film ends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Because by subscribing, you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.